Thank you for tuning in to SRE from home.
Thank you.
All right, so another piece of feedback that we got from a lot of the questions from the audience here is, all right, so we're not Google. We don't have a lot of these crazy processes in the 50-50% dev and ops split. We don't quite have error budgets or have gone to this point where we're utilizing those with all the different services. What if you are a smaller company? What if you're a medium-sized business that doesn't quite have that culture? We've been getting that a lot. So Sanjeev, your talk is so incredibly relevant. So thank you so much for joining. It's been awesome, interacting with you, seeing some fun pictures of your kids too. So it's a real pleasure. And then also thank you for contributing to the SRE report. Some of your feedback was invaluable as we were able to launch that. So Sanjeev Sharma is internationally known DevOps and DevOps cloud transformation, data modernization thought leader, technology executive, and author. Man, you gave me a hard one there. Sanjeev's industry experience. 10 years as CTO, technical executive, and cloud architect leader. As a former IBM distinguished engineer, Sanjeev was recognized at the highest levels of IBM's core of technical leaders. He's currently a principal analyst at Accelerated Strategies. Sanjeev, thank you so much. I love your, we have the Cosmos, Carl Sagan background there. I love it. Take it away.
Let's get started. So thanks for the introduction. I gave you some tongue twisters there, but I appreciate it. But as mentioned, my name is Sanjeev Sharma. My background has been in the DevOps space. I've written 2 books on DevOps. I wrote the original DevOps for Dummies IBM edition, which was a free, 70, 80 page download from IBM. It's still available over there. And then a few years ago, actually the same year when the SRE book came out from Google, I wrote the DevOps Adoption Playbook. So these are kind of my claim to fame. And feel free to get hold of these books. And I blog very regularly, on my blog, sdarchitect.blog. And in fact, this talk came out of a blog piece I wrote. And the title of the blog post was, "You don't need SRE, what you need is SRE." And essentially, I was talking about what we're going to talk about today is, how do you adopt SRE in an organization which is not Google, right? I mean, Google SRE book, while it is great, it is the standard, it defined SRE. What do you do when your organization does not look like Google, right? And then so let's jump into that, right? So the first question that arises there is, what does Google's organization look like, so I can know whether I look like that or not, right? So here's some key factors, right? Why did Google actually go and create SRE as a practice? Well, Google has massive data centers. And what's interesting about these data centers is that they are all based on commodity hardware, right? The hardware is fairly identical across them. And they're commodity hardware, so they have and just because of their massive size, they have a very high incidence of failure. Hard drives fail, switches fail, other physical devices fail. And they talk about this in the introduction chapter of the SRE book, that it is not uncommon to see dozens of, if not hundreds of failures in a massive data center on a regular basis. So what they need to do is have the ability to dynamically shift workloads around, so that when one hardware component is being serviced, they can easily move the workload which is being run without interruption or loss of quality of service to another part of the data center which is still operating as desired. This by itself should qualify most organizations, because in most companies where I've gone there and looked at data centers, they are made up of hardware which is, first of all, not commodity, and in most cases custom hardware, or if not custom, generic hardware has been optimized for the workload being run, right? So you get hardware, you get compute, network, storage, memory based on the specs of what you need for the workload you're going to run on it, not the other way around, which is in a cloud where you go look at certain t-shirt sizes of images and instance server types available, and then you pick one of them based on your workload. And if it's not optimal, you change your workload. You can't go to Google and say, I want you to create a new image type for me. I want you to create something different for me, right? It's what's available from them. The services which are available are what are available. So at Google, these operation teams have to handle these incidents and outages on a constant basis. And like we heard on Jamie's talk earlier on 2 talks ago, right? It results in a lot of toil. It results in a lot of stress for them because they're constantly being faced by these situations. Now, one good thing about that is that because their data centers are fairly homogeneous across them, you can walk into any data center anywhere and it looks pretty much the same. And this is true for all hyperscale cloud vendors, they can automate a lot of these things that happen, the responses to the incidents, because they keep happening over and over again. So the idea here behind SRE is that I will have developers working in my ops team, and I'm oversimplifying, and their job will be to identify tasks which are repetitive and automate them, so that the actual ops people who are dedicated to doing incident response and ops can focus on the outliers. They can focus on things which are not the norm. They are outside, the boundary conditions. They are once in a few months kind of incidents, or which are totally outliers. So the goal of SRE at an organization like Google is to develop software to automate as much of the repetitive tasks as possible, and that's detection and remediation of incidents and outages and lack of and degradation in quality of service, so that your experts in incident response, they can focus on outlier. Now, so you heard this sentence before, right? I mean, when software engineering meets ops, this is when you get SRE. So what do you do in an organization which is not Google, where you don't have these kind of highly optimized massive data centers which are homogeneous, where incidents of the same kind happen over and over again? Well, you still need reliability engineering. You still need to make your services and your systems more reliable. So maybe you change the definition of S from site reliability engineering to service reliability engineering, but you don't need to do it the way Google does. You need to do it a bit differently because your needs are different. So before I talk about how to do SRE, and I've been, in this space, for around 3-4 years now, and I've worked with a lot of clients where I've helped them adopt SRE-like practices. And even before that, I've helped clients adopt reliability engineering in general, resilience and reliability, how to meet their SLA goals for high availability, for example. And there are certain anti-patterns I see. And these are the top 3 anti-patterns I see, right? First is they replace their ops team with SREs, and the entire ops team is gone, and they're replaced with people who are software developers. And they attempt to do this. This never actually happens because they realize it doesn't work. But this is an anti-pattern, right? You're replacing your ops team with all SREs and getting rid of all the expertise you have on your data centers. And we'll go delve into each one of these in the next few slides. Is an anti-pattern. The other anti-pattern I see, which is even more common, is you take your DevOps team and replace it and rename it SRE team, right? In fact, I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he was saying that, a developer he mentors has just been, his title has just changed from DevOps to SRE. And he's been given no training, he's been given no tools, and suddenly it's SRE. Now, I'll go into this in more detail in a coming slide, right? And third is try to adopt the SRE principles by the book with no effort to change your culture. Bring in all the automation, but the culture doesn't change. Well, that's a problem. You have a significant challenges when you do that, because SRE requires a cultural change. So let's delve into each and every one of these. So ops in the enterprise is not easy. If you're a startup, or if you're a company, even an enterprise, which is purely in the cloud, and you've gone all in on one cloud and everything is there, life would be easier. But most large enterprises are not like that. They are not homogeneous. They are more monolithic, right? I mean, we have multiple generations of technologies living together, right? And in a large enterprise, a bank or a healthcare company or even a telco, you walk in, or any kind of company, right? I was recently doing some work for a trucking company. You walk into their data center, and it's what if it was a human house that we would call a multi-generation family, right? There are 5 generations living there together, right? There is mainframes running 20-year-old systems. There is, Kubernetes running in another part of the data center. There is a really outdated version of WebLogic running somewhere else. Windows is all over the place. And I mean, Windows, older versions, and they're all trying to patch it to keep it up to date. It's a multi-generational household. Secondly, the data centers have very limited capacity. They're not elastic, right? You're not going to buy 50% more capacity in your data center so that you can move things around dynamically like, a hyperscale cloud does. As I already mentioned, most of the hardware is custom, optimized for the workload you're running. Thirdly, the networks are a pain because you're trying to link all these systems together, and most organizations are hybrid and multi-cloud. You have SaaS things running somewhere else. You have third-party services coming. Networks are a problem. Most of these data centers have hardware coming in and services and systems coming in from multiple vendors. Vendor management is itself a challenge, right? I mean, some network goes down. Who do you call? Do you call Equinix? Do you call your network router vendor? Do you call your switch vendor? Who do you call? Is it a software issue? And hiring software engineers to do ops is extremely difficult. In fact, this is a question I ask every CIO who I have this conversation with is, are you having trouble hiring software engineers to do software engineering? And the normal answer is, yes, it's very painful. I'm like, and yes, so you are having trouble hiring developers to do development for developing your products, and you think you're not going to have a problem hiring software engineers to become SREs and write code for ops? What makes you have that assumption? So you still need your ops team, but you have to supplement them with SREs. So secondly is how do you adapt? How do you establish SRE teams, right? So renaming your DevOps team SREs is an anti-pattern. So first and foremost, and let me get on my soapbox here, you shouldn't have a DevOps team. There is no such thing as a DevOps team. What you do, DevOps is something everybody does. They have a different role in how DevOps is adopted and adapted and the various tasks are performed, but there shouldn't be a new silo called DevOps team, who is the intermediary now between all the stakeholders in your application delivery pipeline. You don't have a DevOps pipeline, you have an application delivery pipeline, and you shouldn't have a DevOps team. If you have a DevOps team, most likely those are people writing automation, right? They're writing scripts. And that's a very, very, very narrow sliver of DevOps. But let me get off my soapbox. SRE goals and DevOps goals are different. SRE is focused on reliability engineering, on resilience, on managing your SLAs and SLOs, and identifying and automating stuff, whereas DevOps is to have continuous flow of innovation and feedback from what you're delivering so that you can learn. So let ops specialists do ops, let SRE software engineers who you hire to do ops, which is going to be very difficult to do SRE, and let everybody else who's involved, all the stakeholders together, operate as a unit and do DevOps, right? Let's get rid of that DevOps team. If you have a DevOps team, a team called DevOps team, they should be DevOps coaches. Their job is to teach people how to do DevOps currently, but I'll get out that soapbox real quickly. Lastly, establishing an SRE culture, right? First and foremost, in most traditional enterprises, the measure of success is mean time between failure. It is a horrible metric. Mean time to restore, mean time to recovery is a much better metric. Why? Because mean time between failure tells me nothing about the failure. Did I have a 10-minute failure? Did I have a 20-second failure? Did I have a 2-day failure? Did I lose data? Did I just lose quality of service? What happened? Am I going to be fined by the Federal Reserve because I had an outage? Am I going to have to pay penalties because I didn't miss the SLO? Doesn't tell me anything. So you have to move from a culture of mean time between failure to mean time to recovery, and establishing the right SLIs, the indicators, and the SLOs for that. I think Jamie talked about earlier on most organizations don't have error budgets. Exactly, get them, establish them, right? And incident postmortems, right? We talk about blameless incident postmortems, right? And trust me, most postmortems of incidents which happen in large enterprises are blameful. They're not blameless. The whole idea is to figure out who can we roll under the bus. To me, that's totally wrong thinking, but it is even incomplete thinking to figure out why it happened. Rather, what happened, right? The goal of an incident postmortem is to figure out why it happened and what can we change, what can we learn from it, so that we can improve how we operate towards more operational excellence, so that it doesn't happen this time, right? At least I'm like repeating this. I once used the term, I'm like a broken record in front of my children. Then I had to explain what that means. Take player, but luckily I don't have, unfortunately, broken record which gets stuck. But anyway, hiring software engineers to do ops is very difficult, right? That's why I look at all the people right now about SRE, because to learn, this is still a new area. Oh yeah, so before I move on, right? I mean, the Chaos Engineering book is, by the way, phenomenal. Please get hold of it, right? And there's a quote by Nora Jones, who's one of the co-authors there, and she talks about this, right? Incident analysis is not about incidents. It's about learning how your organization works. An incident happened because your organization had an accident, right? Be the NTSB, the people who come in and understand, why an airplane accident happened, right? Go read the reports. I read the reports just to understand how do they think about incidents. The goal is not to figure out who to blame, but to figure out how to prevent it from happening again. So how do you adopt SRE, right? How do you do it? Let's take that initial slide and change it, right? Don't replace your ops team with SREs, supplement your ops team with SREs. Don't rename your DevOps team with SREs, adopt DevOps, don't have a team, and establish a SRE team whose focus is exclusively on automation of repetitive ops tasks, automation of detection and remediation. Adapt the SRE book, adapt SRE practices for your needs, and make an enterprise-wide effort to change the culture and become a culture which focuses on system and application reliability, where the system and application reliability is everybody's problem and everybody's responsibility, right? You know, I remember back it's only maybe 6-7 years ago, I walked into a client and they had been given t-shirts. Everybody had been given a t-shirt which said, everybody is responsible for delivering business value to the client. That includes reliability, right? Continuous business value to the client is reliability. And that t-shirt in that client of mine went to everybody. It went to the CFO, and they said, if you don't release budget and have to furlough people, you are now delaying, delivering business value. It went to the janitor and said, if you're cleaning the restroom and it's closed during office hours, you are now delaying, right? If you're, somebody's not playing Beyonce when you're stressed out, right? Well, that person is, playing Guns N' Roses instead, getting people stressed out, right? You are not, delivering business value. It always comes back to Beyonce. So last but not the least, right? Here's another great book. It's called Seeking SRE by David Blank Edelman. And one of the quotes I got from it is, the modern system is a constantly changing melange, I hope I'm saying that word correctly, of hardware and software embedded in a variable world. That's the world we live in. That's why the chaos engineering piece is also very important, because we cannot understand how a system behaves without interacting with it, and without testing its boundary conditions, and without being ready for outliers. And that's, at the end of the day, what reliability engineering is all about. If it's not an outlier, it shouldn't happen. If it's not testing a boundary condition, nothing should go wrong, in the real world. But that's not true, because the real world is constantly moving, it's constantly churning. And when you go from a traditional data center or cloud, that chaos increases. When you become hybrid, it even increases more. When you become multi-cloud, it increases even more, right? So anyway, that was my talk. I hope it made a lot of sense, made some sense. This is how you can reach me. You can email me, you can DM me on Twitter, you can reach me through my blog.